A black female journalist is minding her own business, calmly recording a protest in a public area. Out of nowhere, two police officers approach her. One of them immediately accuses her of recording without permission. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" one of the officers demands. She responds, unfazed, "I'm just documenting the protest. It's my right to be here." But the officers don't listen. They accuse her of loitering and assert that she doesn't have permission to be recording. They continue dismissing her attempts to explain her professional role, even as she calmly shows her credentials and tries to assert her rights. The officers, however, aren't interested in listening. Instead, they grow more aggressive. They start demanding her ID and berating her for something as trivial as recording public events. Without warning, one of the officers grabs her camera, and the other begins questioning her even more forcefully, refusing to let her explain. They completely ignore the validity of her role and her rights as a journalist. "What are you even doing here?" one of the officers asks condescendingly. She remains composed, trying to explain, "I'm a journalist, and I'm allowed to record here." But the officers are dismissive. "We don't care about your job title," one officer sneers. "You need to leave now." As the situation escalates, they continue treating her like she's a criminal for doing her job. The tension grows, and the crowd that's gathered watches the situation unfold, some recording it on their phones. Then, just when it seems like things can't get worse, the situation takes an unexpected turn. The woman remains calm, standing her ground, but the officers begin to panic as they realize they may have made a serious mistake. Why? Because when her father shows up, things start to change. You won't believe how the situation flips once he reveals who he is. The officers freeze when they realize just who they've been treating like a criminal. The black journalist is a confident and skilled woman, known for her investigative work. She's been on the front lines of many important stories, earning a reputation for being thorough and determined. Her calm, assertive demeanor has made her a trusted figure in her field. Today, she's simply doing her job, covering a protest as part of her latest story. She's dressed for the occasion in professional attire, with her camera in hand, quietly documenting the event. As she walks through the crowd, she's unaware that she's about to be confronted. Two police officers standing nearby notice her, and immediately their assumptions are triggered. The woman doesn't fit their idea of who should be at this protest. They see a black woman with a camera, and to them, it's enough to make them suspicious. Without saying a word, the officers approach her. One officer eyes her from head to toe, sizing her up before speaking. "What do you think you're doing here?" he asks, his tone dismissive. She doesn't flinch. With quiet confidence, she replies, "I'm working. I'm a journalist covering this event." But the officers don't seem interested in her explanation. They quickly assume she's out of line. The second officer, with a huff, says, "No one asked you to be here. You're not allowed to record." She remains calm, offering her credentials, but it's clear they're not interested in the facts. Their prejudices have clouded their judgment. They see a black woman in professional attire, and they're already making assumptions about her and her intentions. "You're breaking the law," one of the officers snaps. "You don't belong here." She tries to explain again, but her voice is drowned out by their dismissiveness. Their words are sharp, their presence intimidating. They try to use their authority to overpower her, treating her like she's guilty before she even has a chance to explain. The more they speak, the more they escalate the situation. But she's unshaken. Her years of experience and dedication to her work have given her the ability to stay calm in the face of adversity. The officers, however, are relentless. They try to intimidate her. their harsh words filled with condescension and dismissal. As they continue to harass her, their assumptions about her race and her place in this situation become clearer. They don't respect her right to be there, nor do they care to hear her side of the story. As the journalist continues walking through the bustling streets, she's focused, using her camera to capture the scenes unfolding around the protest. The air is filled with chants and the energy of the crowd, as demonstrators expressed their frustrations and hopes for change. She is a calm presence amidst the storm of voices, capturing the essence of the moment with professionalism. She avoids intruding on the more chaotic areas, keeping her distance from any potential conflicts. Yet her camera picks up the powerful stories unfolding. While she moves along the street, a subtle shift occurs. She becomes aware of the two police officers stationed nearby, observing the protest. At first, it seems like a normal police presence, but the officer's eyes linger on her, his gaze narrowing. He's watching her, noticing the camera in her hand and making assumptions based on her appearance. Without any prior interaction or warning, one of the officers steps forward abruptly, cutting off her path. His stance is aggressive, and his tone is sharp. "What's this? What are you doing here?" he demands. His voice is authoritative, assuming control of the situation without even knowing the facts. The journalist, taken aback by the sudden confrontation, pauses and looks up, keeping her composure. "I'm documenting this protest as a journalist," she responds calmly, meeting his gaze without fear. But the officer's suspicion is immediate, and his demeanor changes to one of dismissive arrogance. "Documenting? Are you recording without our permission?" he asks, his tone condescending. His voice rises slightly, clearly uncomfortable with her presence. The officers around him begin to gather, closing in on her in a subtle show of force. "I'm not required to have permission to record public events," she responds, her voice firm yet measured. She knows her rights and is prepared to stand her ground. But the officer isn't listening. He looks at her with disbelief, like her words mean nothing. "You don't get to just walk around recording everything, especially not us," he sneers. "You need to show ID, now." The journalist takes a deep breath, remaining calm, but it's clear that the situation is escalating unnecessarily. She reaches for her identification, but before she can fully hand it over, the officer slaps her hand away and dismisses the ID. "I said, show me ID, not your excuses," he snaps, his voice laced with anger and judgment. The second officer, who has been standing back, steps forward now, his arms crossed. "Yeah, what she said. No one gets to just wander around here and make videos. You're not above the law." Despite the clear violation of her rights, the journalist maintains a composed, confident posture. She's been in these situations before, and knows the importance of remaining calm when facing intimidation. But as the situation intensifies, she begins to feel the frustration build inside her. She tries again to explain, "I'm allowed to do this. I'm not breaking any laws. I'm doing my job. I'm a journalist." The officer's response is swift and dismissive. "You're a what? A journalist? I don't think so. I don't need to listen to this. Hand over your ID right now, or I'll have to detain you." The woman's heart races for a moment, but she doesn't let it show. The more they escalate, the more determined she becomes. She reaches for her identification once again, her fingers gripping it tightly, but her thoughts are on the injustice unfolding. This is more than just an ordinary confrontation. It's an attempt to silence her, to undermine her right to report the truth. The officers continue to refuse to listen to her calm explanation, and the words from the bystanders are drowned out by the officers' increasing hostility. Some onlookers have started recording the scene on their phones, capturing the interaction. But most people just watch from the sidelines, not daring to intervene for fear of angering the police or becoming part of the conflict. The tension is palpable. The journalist, still composed and firm, is now in a standoff with two police officers, neither of whom are willing to respect her rights as a journalist. And, as they make their demands louder, she knows that what happens next could affect more than just her. The officers continue to stand over the journalist, who remains calm despite their escalating aggression. She tries once again to explain herself, her voice steady and clear, but the officers aren't listening. Their words grow sharper, their tone filled with condescension and disrespect. "You think you're above the law?" One officer sneers, his face flushed with frustration. "You're not special. You can't just go around recording people, especially not the police." She maintains her composure, but it's clear that the officers have no interest in hearing her side of the story. "I'm doing my job," she replies, keeping her voice level. "I'm allowed to be here and record. This is my right." The first officer scoffs, cutting her off. "Job? You think because you have a camera, you can just do whatever you want? We don't answer to people like you." His words sting with disdain, as if he believes her profession gives her no authority, her voice no weight. The second officer steps forward, raising his voice to match his partner's. "You think, because you have a camera and a badge, that you're some kind of authority. You're nothing but a nuisance," he growls. "Hand over your ID, or we'll make this worse for you." Despite their aggressive taunts, the journalist stands firm. She doesn't flinch, doesn't let their words rattle her. But inside, she feels a fire of frustration burning brighter. She's tried to explain, but it's as if her words are falling on deaf ears. They won't listen. And it's clear that this isn't about the law anymore. It's about power. The officers want to assert control, to silence her, to remind her that they hold the power, not her. As the tension builds, a small crowd begins to form around the scene. People stop what they're doing, turning their heads as the confrontation grows louder. Some people take out their phones, recording the incident for evidence. A few mutter quietly to one another, while others nervously glance around, unsure of what to do. Many don't intervene, afraid to challenge the officers in any way. The rest watch in silence, uncertain of how to help or unsure of the risks involved. The journalist remains calm and composed, but the contrast is stark between her peaceful demeanor and the increasing aggression from the officers. They continue to shout demands at her, the words flying faster and louder, but she doesn't break. "You need to listen to me. I'm not going anywhere until you realize I'm not doing anything wrong," she says firmly, her voice resolute. The officers, however, are beyond reason. One officer steps closer, towering over her, trying to make her feel small, trying to intimidate her. "You think your little camera makes you untouchable?" he demands. "You don't get to act like this in front of me. We don't answer to you. Now, hand over your ID, or I'll have to place you under arrest." The journalist feels the weight of the situation, but she doesn't back down. Her mind races, wondering how this has escalated so quickly, but she doesn't let fear or frustration show. She knows her rights, and she isn't going to let these officers trample on them. The crowd is watching, some still recording, others nervously shifting from foot to foot, unsure if they should intervene. It's a dangerous spot to be in. They can see the injustice unfolding before them, but fear of the officers stops many from acting. The tension in the air is palpable. The officers' anger is growing, but the journalist's resolve remains unshaken. Every moment that passes feels like an eternity, the standoff getting more intense by the second. As the tension escalates, the journalist remains calm, her composure unwavering despite the mounting hostility from the officers. However, just when the situation seems at its boiling point, a car pulls up nearby, the sound of its engine loud enough to catch the attention of those gathered. The journalist's father, a well-dressed, confident businessman, steps out of the car. His presence is commanding, and his every step exudes authority. He notices the scene immediately and strides over to the officers, who still have their focus solely on the journalist. At first, the officers don't recognize him. They continue to bark their orders at the journalist, ignoring the newcomer. But as the man draws closer, a flicker of recognition crosses the faces of the officers. They don't know him yet, but his air of authority is undeniable. "Excuse me, officers," the man says, his voice calm but carrying an undeniable force. "I think there's been a mistake here." The officers pause for a moment, looking up at him. They exchange uncertain glances, sizing him up, but still unsure of his identity. The journalist glances at her father, a small but knowing smile appearing on her face as she senses the shift in energy. The man steps closer, pulling out a card from his pocket. "I am Name, and I am the owner of Company Name. You've made a serious mistake by treating my daughter this way." The officers freeze. The realization hits them like a wave. This isn't just any businessman. This is someone powerful, someone they should have treated with respect from the beginning. The shock on their faces is instant, their arrogance replaced with fear. They stumble over their words, fumbling for an apology, but nothing comes out. "Is there a problem here, officers?" The father continues, his voice steady, authoritative, yet undeniably calm. He's not yelling, he's not raising his voice, but the effect is clear. The officers are visibly shaken. Oui." One officer starts, but trails off unsure of what to say. His face turns red, realizing the gravity of the situation. "We didn't know who she was. And you didn't bother to ask, did you?" The father interrupts, his tone cold but not angry. "You didn't even consider that maybe, just maybe, she had every right to be here and record this. Instead, you harassed her, humiliated her, and treated her like a criminal for no reason at all. That stops now." The officers stand still, silent, unable to move or respond. The father's presence and authority have completely changed the dynamic of the situation. "Your actions today were completely unacceptable." The father continues, "You will be held accountable for this. I will make sure of it." There's a long pause, the atmosphere thick with tension. The officers, still in shock, start to apologize, but the damage has been done. The father doesn't yell, doesn't raise his voice, but his presence alone is enough to break them. The father turns to his daughter, his demeanor softening. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" he asks, his voice now full of concern. The journalist nods, her calmness never wavering. "I'm fine, Dad. Thank you." The officers stand in silence, defeated and humiliated. The father's words have struck deep, and they know there's nothing they can do to undo the wrong they've done. As the father and daughter begin to walk away, the officers remain rooted to the spot, too embarrassed to say anything further. The crowd, once hesitant to intervene, now murmurs in agreement, the injustice having been exposed. The atmosphere is tense, the officers still visibly shaken by the realization of their mistake. The father stands firm, his presence commanding respect as he addresses the officers with a calm authority that leaves no room for further argument. He looks at the officers one by one, making sure they understand the gravity of their actions. "You will treat my daughter with the respect she deserves," he says, his voice clear and unwavering. "This kind of behavior is unacceptable. You've humiliated her in front of everyone, and you will answer for it." The officers glance at each other, their faces flushed with embarrassment. They try to stammer out apologies, but their words seem hollow and unconvincing, their confidence from earlier completely gone. We didn't mean to," one of the officers begins, but the father interrupts him. "No," the father responds firmly, "you didn't mean to, but you did. And now you need to make this right." The father steps forward, his tone shifting slightly, but still strong. "You're not above the law. No one is. And today, you've shown the kind of prejudice that cannot be ignored. I will ensure that this incident is addressed, and that you face consequences for your actions." The officers remain silent, now visibly uncomfortable, realizing that their actions have cost them much more than just a moment of pride. They had assumed they could bully the woman without repercussions, but now they were face to face with someone who wouldn't let them get away with it. The father turns back to his daughter, his demeanor softening. He places a hand on her shoulder, his voice changing to one of concern. "Are you all right?" he asks, genuinely worried. She nods, her calm and composed demeanor never wavering. "I'm fine, Dad. Thank you for stepping in." With that, the father and daughter turn to leave. As they walk away, the officers remain rooted in place, silent and defeated. The crowd, which had been watching from a distance, starts murmuring among themselves, their faces reflecting a mixture of relief and agreement. The injustice has been exposed, and they know that this situation will not go unnoticed. As the father and daughter walk away, the tension in the air begins to dissipate. The officers are left standing there, their pride shattered and their authority questioned. The father's words have had the desired effect. They know they've lost, and they know they'll have to answer for what they've done. The journalist walks with her head held high, the weight of the situation now behind her. The support of her father has made all the difference, and she knows that justice will be served. The incident spreads rapidly across social media platforms, sparking outrage and a wave of support for the journalist. Videos of the officers aggressively confronting the woman, and the powerful moment when her father arrives to intervene, begin circulating, drawing attention from people nationwide. Hashtags like #justice for journalists and #police accountability trend as social media users, celebrities, activists, and ordinary citizens share their views on the situation. The public is horrified by the officer's behavior, and the posts quickly go viral, causing the story to dominate headlines. People from all walks of life join the conversation, with many expressing their own experiences of being racially profiled or mistreated by law enforcement. Discussions emerge on news channels and in comment sections about the importance of respecting all individuals, regardless of their profession or background, and the need for deeper reforms in the way police interact with marginalized communities. Outrage grows as the public condemns the officer's behavior, with widespread calls for consequences and changes within the police force. In interviews and articles, the journalist speaks openly about the trauma she experienced. Her calm demeanor, despite the abuse she endured, serves as a source of inspiration to others who have faced similar struggles. "This wasn't just about me," she says during one interview. "It's about every single person who has ever been judged or mistreated, simply because of who they are. We need to demand better from the people in power. No one should have to live in fear of being mistreated for simply existing." Her father, who has always been a quiet, behind-the-scenes figure, begins to speak publicly about the issues at hand. He uses his platform as a successful businessman and influential public figure to call for justice and reform. In a statement made to the media, he urges law enforcement to embrace accountability and emphasize respect for everyone, regardless of their race. "My daughter was doing her job as a journalist," he says firmly, "and no one, especially a law enforcement officer, should ever treat someone like that. This incident goes beyond my daughter. It affects us all." The impact of their words spreads far beyond their initial circle of influence. The story becomes a rallying point for organizations advocating for racial justice and police reform. The calls for systemic change grow louder, with protests organized in cities across the nation, demanding accountability and an end to the mistreatment of Black individuals. The press amplifies the voices of those who have long been calling for reform, and political leaders are forced to reckon with the issue. People begin to demand policy changes, and new legislation is introduced at local and state levels. It leads to a broader public examination of the structures that allow such incidents to occur, with calls for transparency in policing and greater oversight of officers' actions. Communities come together to push for a more equitable society, one where respect and fairness are not just ideals, but guarantees. The father and daughter, now recognized as influential voices in the fight for justice, continue their advocacy. They attend rallies, meet with lawmakers, and support grassroots organizations working to protect marginalized communities. They know that while their individual story is important, it is just one part of a much larger movement. Their commitment to justice becomes a symbol of hope, proving that standing up for what is right can spark change no matter who you are. As the incident continues to gain attention, more people join the fight for a fairer and more just system. The movement continues to grow, fueled by the hope that one day no one will be treated unjustly due to their race or background. The actions of one family have brought national attention to an issue that has plagued many for years, and the father and daughter stand resolute in their mission to create lasting change. The story comes to a powerful conclusion, reinforcing the message that standing up for one's rights is crucial, especially when facing injustice. The journalist and her father's actions serve as a reminder that no one should be treated unfairly simply because of their race, profession, or position in society. Throughout the ordeal, the young woman maintained her composure, using her voice and dignity to challenge the unjust actions of the police officers. The story teaches a clear and important lesson. Every person, no matter their background or profession, deserves to be treated with respect. The journalist's calm and composed response to the harassment she faced shows the importance of holding on to one's integrity and standing firm in the face of adversity. It's not just about fighting for yourself. It's about standing up for the principles of fairness and equality, ensuring that no one is mistreated because of who they are. Another significant lesson from the story is the importance of holding those in power accountable. The officer's actions were not just a violation of the journalist's rights, they were a reflection of a larger issue that needs to be addressed. Accountability ensures that justice is served and helps to prevent future abuses of power. It's a reminder that power must be used responsibly, and when it is misused, those responsible must face consequences. The story also highlights the role that resources, influence, and authority can play in fighting injustice. The journalist's father, as a successful businessman, could have easily stayed out of the situation, but he chose to use his platform to speak out, making a difference not only for his daughter, but for others who may have been mistreated in similar ways. His actions show that individuals in positions of power have a responsibility to advocate for justice, equality, and fairness. By speaking out and taking action, Both the journalist and her father made an impact, proving that change is possible when people use their voices and resources for good. The lesson is clear. Standing up for what's right can be a powerful force for change, and anyone, regardless of their position, can make a difference by using their influence to fight injustice. The story also reminds us that when faced with adversity, we should never back down from defending our rights and the rights of others. Justice, fairness, and respect are values that must be upheld, and it is up to all of us to stand together and demand a better, more equitable world for everyone.